Okay, let me just turn off the recording.
Soon, and then I can't.
Okay, you started.
Welcome, everybody. Breaking Israel News. I'm the managing editor, David Sidman, here with the world's top biblical journalist, Eliyahu Berkowitz.
I am the world's only biblical journalist.
I'm sure there's one other. And today, we're going to talk about Lebanon, or as I say, gone, gone, Lebanon. Lebanon is a very interesting place. It's a lot like a lot of other Muslim countries like Syria and Iraq. They're not really countries. They're just kind of borders carved out for 4 or 5 different ethnic factions. In Lebanon, it's Sunnis, Shiites, Druze, and Christians for the most part, and of course Maronites. And what's happening now is Lebanon is in a very dire economic situation. The government to cover its debt. By the way, Lebanon suffers one of the worst debt ratings in the entire world. And to cover for that, the government of Lebanon tried to impose a tax on WhatsApp, meaning every time you send a text message via WhatsApp, you would actually have to pay for it, which kind of defies the entire purpose of the internet because communication is supposed to be free. So the Lebanese people said enough is enough, and they all kind of took to the streets, and there's this massive nationwide protest. If you see the footage, you just see thousands of people taking to the street and protesting, and it's actually a very kind of carnival-like atmosphere in their protests. They're really having a lot of fun with it. But at the same time, it's a very serious protest. This is a real revolt by the people of Lebanon against a corrupt kleptocracy, which is Lebanon, and they're saying enough is enough. Now, Hezbollah is kind of in an awkward position because Hezbollah basically runs Lebanon. They run the government. I mean, Hariri and all the guys who are officially the prime minister, all Lebanese puppets, all Hezbollah puppets. But the truth is that Hezbollah really runs the show. They call the shots. They are extremely involved in the Lebanese defense forces. And the nation and the Lebanese people know that. And the Hezbollah is also a target of the protests. And oddly, and Hezbollah itself came out against the public protests and against the civil unrest, and they said they opposed it. And now what just happened yesterday is that the prime minister of Lebanon actually resigned, which means that which begs the question, who's in charge of Lebanon? Well, the answer is Hassan Nasrallah and the Hezbollah. They don't want to admit it because it's much easier to rule from the back end than to have to be the guy to face the nation. But there's only so long he can kind of hide his role in the influence of the policies of Lebanon. And right now, as Mordechai Kedar, who is probably the top Middle East expert in the world, said, or at least the top Arab affairs expert in the world, he explained, he said the mask is off. Now everyone sees that Lebanon is being led by Hezbollah, not by some pretty boy named Saad Hariri, who is Christian. And it's going to be tough because in order to save face, Hezbollah and Nasrallah are going to have to find some new puppet government to replace Hariri and implement all of the policies of Hezbollah.
If I can jump in here,
Yes, sure.
There's an interesting aspect of Lebanese history, modern history, that a lot of people are not aware of, and it really influences how the situation plays out. Lebanon, you look at the Middle East, there's a tendency to say, oh, it's all Arab, it's all Muslim, but that's not actually accurate, and it's especially not accurate when dealing with Lebanon. Lebanon, it might be a war-torn country right now, but in 100 years ago, Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon was considered the Paris of the Middle East, the Paris of the Mediterranean. And there was actually a railroad that the British had built that went from Beirut to Cairo, because these were two flourishing cultured cities. And one of the reasons is they're simply not Arab Muslim strongholds. They're not Arab Muslim countries. Egypt is Egypt. Even when they're Muslim, they don't necessarily have the Muslim identity in the same way that the other Arab countries, which is why they're fighting against the Muslim Brotherhood right now. And Lebanon, there was the political system that's set up now was set up on the basis of the fact that when Britain and France carved up the Middle East, Lebanon had a Christian majority, and it was supposed to be the Christian entity in the Middle East, because the Middle East was very Christian for a very long time, which I think a lot of Western Christians are not aware of. It was the oldest, the original Christians are here in this region. And so the original political system that was set up by the British and French actually gave much to the Christians. And then when was that? In the 70s that the PLO took over in Lebanon, and Israel was forced to go in and straighten the situation out.
I think it was 1980. I think it was in the 80s.
In the 80s?
You're not talking about the Kippur War. You're talking about the Grapes of Wrath.
Exactly.
I think that was 3, if I'm not mistaken.
And there was supposed to be a Christian leader that came out of that, and he was assassinated. So the Muslims have been taking over, and the Christians have been leaving, and as a result, there's less and less of that of a Christian presence.
And not only that, but the Christians in southern Lebanon were very loyal to Israel. Israel used them as mercenaries to fight the Hezbollah. They were called the Southern Lebanese Army.
Well, they were mercenaries, but they had a vested interest in
right. Mercenaries might not be the best way to put it, but because they were basically fighting for their homes. They weren't, sent abroad, but they were hired, but they were being sponsored by Israel. And Ehud Barak, that idiot who hangs out with Epstein, the pedophile, completely abandoned them in 2000.
I want you to really don't hold back. I want you to say what you really think of these people.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we were on the brink of winning that war. Meaning, it was in our reach to conquer southern Lebanon, which is biblically part of Israel. And just before we were on the brink of winning and conquering and forging these incredible ties with Christians from southern Lebanon, Ehud Barak, who's one of the most corrupt prime ministers Israel's ever had, big-time globalist, hangs out with Jeffrey Epstein a lot when he was alive, and he basically said, we're all going home. He pulled all the troops out, and what that did was that the Hezbollah were like, okay, I guess we won, and they basically took all the southern Lebanese army who was fighting them hostage.
I want to just throw in that I remember when we pulled out. I mean, even when you have to retreat as a soldier, there are ways you do it, and it was just such a crazy mess the way he pulled Israel out. They left.
Right. It was all there was no contingency plan. I was in the army when that happened. Everyone just no one really understood what was going on. Everything was being delayed. But, it's interesting. Brigitte Gabriel, who is a Christian Lebanese woman, has said that there are thousands and thousands of Christian Lebanese, not only in Lebanon, but throughout the world, who are willing to go back and fight for Lebanon side by side with Israel and reclaim their home country that's been completely hijacked by Hezbollah.
I also want to point out what's important to Americans, not just Christians, but Americans to realize is that Hezbollah, when you say Hezbollah, you're actually saying Iran. Hezbollah is an arm of Iran. Lebanon, which is on the Mediterranean coast, is an essential part of the land bridge that Iran is trying to establish to the Mediterranean. Which, if they establish a land bridge to the Mediterranean, you can forget about the entire region. They'll just take over the Mediterranean. They'll really take over the Strait of Hormuz, and they will have everyone in trouble. They'll just
they're just constantly waiting for the right opportunity to pounce on every destabilized country in the Middle East. And one thing that's interesting that a lot of the Christian viewers might find interesting is that when Israel fought in Lebanon, that was actually the first time that a Jewish army and a Christian army fought side by side against a common Muslim enemy.
Oh, so that's that I never thought of, and you're absolutely right. And that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. So I want to kind of get into the biblical perspective. And I told you this morning that I had a theory that was inspired by Hashem, or as people who speak the English language call him God. And that is this. We all know that, or those of you who've been following the news know that Hezbollah has been foaming at the mouth for the past few months, threatening to attack Israel, ready to attack Israel, talking about attacking Israel. They've just been blasting all these press releases that any minute now we're going to attack Israel. Israel was obviously scrambling to ready for an attack. They even fired an anti-tank missile at one of our patrol vehicles and nearly killed our soldiers. And if they managed to, Israel would have obviously opened a complete can of whoop, you know what, and a new front, and it would have been the third Lebanese war. Didn't happen, but there is just the tension coming from Lebanon to Israel was so palpable you could cut it with a butter knife. And all of a sudden, this protest happens. This mass protest springs up, and Lebanon is completely bogged down by how are they going to invade Israel when they can't go from one street to the other because it's filled with people protesting? The entire country is being shut down. Banks haven't been open for weeks. Schools haven't been open for weeks. And the Hezbollah is stuck between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand, they are now in control of Lebanon. On the other hand, they've inherited this complete mess, and there's no way they're going to have the ability to fight Israel now. And I spoke about, when Turkey was going to invade northern Syria, that a very intelligent Middle East expert named Guy Bachor said what that's going to do is going to pull the Shiite Hezbollah towards northern Syria to engage with Turkey, pulling them away from Israel. But what I think is happening is God, Hashem, is sending these protesters to Lebanon to literally block Hezbollah from their plans to attack Israel. And since these protests happened, you haven't heard one word from Hezbollah about attacking Israel, whereas before the protest, every day they would release something to the press about their imminent plans to attack Israel.
I disagree with you on 2 points. One of them we've discussed, which is you seem to feel that Hezbollah has a problem, that there's so much of the populace, Christian and Muslim, that object to Hezbollah. But there have already been videos coming out of Lebanon where you just have soldiers, they don't even break a sweat, lock and load, open fire, boom. And just, they don't care. We're not talking about Western culture. We're not talking about Western society. That's what they do. Also, I disagree with you on a second point, which is that we're not talking about, when we talk about war between Lebanon and Israel, we're not talking really about war. What we're talking about is that war is where there's a dispute, one side fights the other. Usually it involves taking land, incursion. you had America conquering Germany, and that was the end of the second. That's not what they want, and that's not the kind of war we're talking about. They have hundreds of thousands of rockets that Iran is helping them to upgrade to be smart, to be higher tech. Until now, so I think when we talk about war with them, Israel's interest is don't cross the line. And they've been playing with that, but for the most part, they followed that. Lebanon, their interest is they want to see dead Jews. That's all they really want. That's all Iran wants. Iran doesn't want to invade Israel. They'll be perfectly satisfied killing every single Israeli, killing every single Jew, and then going back to Iran. Maybe they'll come to the beach. But Hezbollah has no interest in having a war with us. They have an interest in killing us. So for that reason, I think it's not going to exactly play out. They don't need, domestic tranquility enough to get an army together. They just need enough domestic tranquility to have a few guys push buttons to shoot rockets at us.
Well, no, that's another theory, is that they might use a war of attrition against Israel as a diversion for the civil unrest. Meaning, nothing unites a nation and nothing unites a desperate nation like a war. And that's also a likely scenario. They can divert the nation's attention by opening a front with Israel. But I think, like you said, they're much more intelligent people. They're much more educated Muslims and Christians in Lebanon than a lot of people realize. They're not like, it's not Afghanistan where one Taliban leader shoots his AK-47 in the air and yodels Allah's name a million times, and they all just blindly follow him on horseback. Like you said, it's a very sophisticated, very kind of savvy, modern country. I don't think they're going to fall for a lot. I don't think they're going to take it. If they start really killing protesters, it's gonna be a huge mess, and I really don't see how they're gonna effectively launch this operation.
I just remember during the Israeli war in Lebanon, there was Sabra and Shatila, which were allegedly refugee camps for Palestinians, and that was not true. They were mostly men, and it was pretty much two armed camps that they agreed to get rid of their weapons because Israel was around, and Israel was siding with the phalangists, the Christians, and the Christians just went in and slaughtered them. How many were killed? Hundreds? I don't know, but I'm afraid that if they do start killing protesters, somehow they're going to blame it on Israel. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but when we're dealing in an environment where left-wing press, sides with al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, and calls him an austere religious scholar, I think we can have Hezbollah killing its own people, and the left-wing press. I'm wondering what the Washington Post headline would read. Something like, Hezbollah may have pulled the trigger, but Israel was behind the protests.
Yeah, but thanks to Donald Trump, I think most normal people don't really take the mainstream media so seriously anymore. So I'm not worried about what they're going to say. Not that I did when people did take them seriously. If they think Israel, I have a theory that if the more Arabs think that Israel is behind killing them, the more they'll fear us. But whatever. I want to get into you had a very interesting theory regarding the war, the civil unrest in Lebanon.
Yeah, and you
to the Bible, to the Torah.
I may have prepared the rocket. You lit the fuse just now. You really got me going, I'll tell you. One of the reasons why I see the news the way I do is because it's more efficient, it's actually more accurate, and it's incredibly helpful to use the Bible and prophecy to That's a cute kid. It's incredibly useful to use Bible and prophecy to understand current events. By that I mean, um, for example, when we talk about Israel, we're talking about Israel. We're talking about Jacob. When we're talking about an Arab country, we're talking about Ishmael. You raised the point that it's very interesting. This is the first time that in Lebanon, it was the first time that ever in history, the first time ever in history that a Jewish army, not Jews in a foreign army, but a Jewish army fought alongside an actual Christian army, an army that identified as Christians, not an army of a foreign entity that contained Christians. This was
Right.
a Jewish identified army and a Christian identified army, both of them national units coming together. So what we were actually seeing, I was looking for a verse. It always fascinated me. If you go to the part of Genesis where Jacob and Esau make peace. Jacob and Esau make peace finally. It was a whole big process. That whole process is one of the most essential key sections of the Torah for me for as a Jew, because that's when Jacob got his name. That's when Jacob really got his mission. And what's amazing is Esau Esau said to Jacob, let's go on together. Let's continue the derech together. Let's continue the road together. And Jacob, he said to him, no. You go ahead because I'm going slowly. I'm going slowly because of my flocks and because of my children, and I'll meet you in Seir. And I'm not really sure the meaning of the word Seir, but the place Jacob actually went to was Sukkot. Jacob went to Sukkot. And Sukkot, as we know, is the holiday when the 70 nations come to serve Hashem, God, as you said, with Jacob, with the Jews. So whenever I read that, I saw that I understood it as being an explicit prophecy that Jacob and Esau would come together in the future. And it never appears in the Torah that we see Jacob and Esau coming together, and the Torah doesn't lie. So if Jacob said, we'll meet up in the future, then you know it's going to happen. And if it didn't happen in the Torah, it's got to happen now. So when I see them coming together, if you see Lebanon, which should be the Christian country in the Middle East, should be Esau. And it should be joining Israel. And I wrote an article last week when we were talking about Lebanon. Lebanon was an essential, it played a central role in building the temple.
Sure,
The cedars of Lebanon, which are an endangered species, which I think is significant. It's endangered in Lebanon. Also, they sent down very special, also stones and special craftsmen. There was one craftsman, I can't remember his name, but he was a Lebanese craftsman who came to do all this work. He reminded me very much of Bezalel, how Bezalel built the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So this connection between Israel and Lebanon certainly has a lot to do with the second temple, perhaps with the third temple, and this connection with Israel and Esau, especially as you pointed it out. That's brilliant. I don't think anyone's pointed it out. You know, that a fully self-identified as Christian army fought alongside with a fully self-identified Jewish army is huge, is absolutely huge. So there's definitely that biblical end of days aspect to what's happening there. That's how I see it.
I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you very much for your incredible perspective. It's always really interesting to hear how what we just see as news stories comes together when you look at it in the biblical and biblical context. So thank you very much, Eliyahu. And I'm David Sidman from Breaking Israel News. And Shabbat Shalom, Erev Tov. Bye.
Hello.